in Deep Geek Live. This is the first time I've been using a slightly new system, so you probably notice up there's a little duck that there isn't usually, but do shout if there are any glitches along the way. But I am delighted to welcome my guest today, who is one of the mainstays of the community, the power and the voice behind the official podcast for Watchers on the Wall. Delighted to welcome her back. Sansa Snark, do you want to say hi?
Hello, one of the mainstays. Oh my goodness, that just makes me feel so happy to hear that. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me back on. It's always a pleasure to join you. I'm glad that we got to meet at Con of Thrones a few weeks ago, even if it was just like in passing quickly. But I'm glad that we officially got to meet in person. So that was one of the things I wanted to check off my list at Con this year. So yeah, absolutely.
Con of Thrones was a complete blur, and there were a couple of people that I saw a lot less of than I was hoping, and you were one. Vanessa, who I'm hoping I'm going to have on next week, was the other. So I get a chance to catch up with her next week. But today we've got a great topic. It's a topic I'm quite interested and excited in, which is House Stark. What is the origin, just sort of unpacking what happened in the story that we saw, and what's a little bit about what's going on in the future. So let's just sort of start off. I think we'll try and take it roughly chronologically, I think. And I know we've got the prequel that that has been, or they've just finished, I think, filming the pilot. Now you, as part of sort of the Watchers on the Wall community, you've been all over this. Could you just give us a headline of what is it that we see about House Stark in this pilot for the prequel?
Yeah, and this is something that has me particularly really excited because House Stark is one of my absolute favorites. Sansa's my favorite character, so I'm really excited that we're going to see what we think we're going to see is like Proto Starks, like very early Starks, because based on the kind of timeline of where the prequel is falling, we do know that it's going to be happening during the Age of Heroes, and House Stark itself was established, we know, by Bran the Builder. Kind of like at the end, the long night is what kind of brings an end to the Age of Heroes. So it's like Age of Heroes, long night, and then things go on from there. So what I think we're gonna this is kind of but what we think we're gonna see is like it's gonna be House Stark like right on the cusp of becoming like a house as we are used to houses in like the current events of A Song of Ice and Fire, if that makes sense, because it took kind of a while for the for houses of Westeros to kind of become what they were. So what we think we're going to see is just like basically just an early version of the Starks. As far as filming goes, what's been really interesting that we've seen, as you mentioned, the pilot has wrapped up filming. They're working on, as far as we know, we assume they're still in the editing room, editing that down into whatever is going to be pitched to the network so that they greenlight the show. I don't think there's any chance they're going to not greenlight it. I mean, it's at this point, I don't think there's a chance of that happening. But what we saw in filming was really interesting because we saw what looked like, men with beards and capes, and they're in ships, not ships, they're in boats. They look kind of like, I don't know what the term is, but what you would take from the bigger ship to land. You know what I mean? One of those smaller things.
It's sort of a landing craft thing.
Yeah. But you can see, like, when you zoom in on some of the details, and we have all this in stories on watchersonthewall.com if anyone is interested. But what you can see is a really interesting detail. First of all, there is like a carving on the ship that looks kind of Viking-like, which is interesting. But it looks like a version of a dire wolf. And then you also see what looks like an early version of their sigil. It's gray and white, just like Stark colors. It's a white banner. It has a gray. It looks kind of like a dire wolf, but an early version of it. So this is once again kind of like early Starks, Proto Starks, I think is what we're seeing. So that was really exciting. I didn't know how much detail we'd get to see from some shots of filming. So that's very exciting, I think. So.
I mean, I would agree. And for those who don't know the context for this, so the name that we've been given is Blood Moon. Now,
Yes.
we think this might be just sort of like a cover name. We don't know. It's probably not the name we're going to end up with. George R. R. Martin is always like saying that he wants it to be called The Long Night. He like keeps on referring to the project that I'm not allowed to call The Long Night and things like that. So he clearly is pitching this and viewing this, and he's been involved as being to do with that period of time. Now, that means, as you say, we're talking about Proto Starks. The thing that fascinates me about the boat is that we don't think of Starks as being associated with boats, really. There is,
right.
There's the river, but Winterfell's not on the river. It's a little way away from the river. So we're not looking at them out of a base at Winterfell doing stuff. This might even be pre-Winterfell for all we know. So what's your best kind of speculation about what's going on there? Do you think they're like arriving in Westeros? Are they trying to find a new home? What do you think the boat's about?
So that's a good question, because we do know, like, there is the Starks obviously are not known, like you said, for being a seafaring kind of people. We've never really known them to have much in the way of boats or ships. However, earlier Starks did. There was a Stark who I want to say his name is Theon Stark. Let me double check my notes. Yes, Theon Stark. He was known as the Hungry Wolf, and he was actually like repelled the Andals out of the north whenever they were invading, which is why the First Men have kind of remained. The Starks are descendants of First Men and not Andals in the north. But anyway, Theon Stark actually sailed to Andalos. He slew the Andal leader who showed up in the north, and then he I love this story so much. He actually sailed to Andalos with the corpse of this guy. Oh, let me find his name. Argos 7-Star. So he sailed to Andalos with the corpse of Argos 7-Star strapped to the prow of his ship, and then killed a bunch of Andals when he landed there, as kind of a warning, like, stay out of the north, et cetera, et cetera. We also know that Theon Stark, I think he warred against, like, there was a war with the Three Sisters. And then he also landed a fleet on the Fingers at some point, or ships on the Fingers. So we do know that they had ships at some point, but it was never, obviously they weren't like a naval power or anything. But after Brandon the Shipwright, another earlier went off on a great sea abandon, burned the remaining Stark fleet, and they've never had ships since then. So why is this relevant? Well, depending on the timeline, this probably isn't the Andal invasion, because that happens after the Long Night. So, well, I mean, I guess it could be possible that this is the Andal invasion, but this could just be kind of, the Starks had a pretty bloody and aggressive history, and they were really pretty aggressive in making themselves the power amongst the other First Men clans in the north. So this could just be them kind of going out and conquering wherever they could. Like you said, they're not necessarily situated like on a river or anything like that. But I don't think that means they wouldn't have had access at some point, maybe to what's the bay right there where White Harbor sits?
The White Knife River. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, the White Knife down.
I mean, I think that where we kind of place this in history is where George R. R. Martin, he kind of describes it. The current story that we have in Game of Thrones, there's one king. Before that, there were like 7. Before that, there were like dozens. Before that, there were hundreds. And we're in the world of hundreds of petty kingdoms all over the place. It was just like whoever's strong enough to declare themselves king or duke or queen or whatever, then they were in charge of that area. So that's the world we're in. And the Starks were not in control of the north. The Starks had their little area, and then slowly, over literally millennia, they kicked out one petty king after the other petty king, and like subdued some people here and killed some people there, and eventually they became in charge of the entire north. So we're at the beginning of that process. And when we're saying Proto Starks, what we're talking about is probably before the official founding of House Stark, which is with Bran the Builder. So that's the kind of world we're looking at. So yes, I'm imagining a lot more of a kind of a Viking-y feel to the Starks. Whether they're always going to be on boats doing raiding and stuff, I don't know, but they're very much, it's a lot more of a brutal age. And this ties in with a question from one of my patrons. As always, the way that we're going to run this is that I'm structuring this around the questions I get from my patrons. I ask a while before every live stream. I ask my patrons over on Patreon if they've got any questions, and I structure the discussion around them. If there are any super chats, and I saw a couple came through a moment ago, just picking up on them on the new system, I will obviously come to them as soon as I possibly can. But Anne Clough was saying, what do you think we will learn about the Starks in the prequel series? At what point in the history of the Starks does the story take place? The timeline is so wonky in the early years that I have a hard time navigating it. And it is wonky deliberately because that's what George R. R. Martin made it. So I think that hopefully we've covered off of that in what we're talking about. Is there anything else before we start kind of moving on? Is there anything else, Sam, that you want to sort of highlight about the Starks in this sort of early life that we have here on the prequel, or what we might see?
I think we covered it pretty well. As far as, you know, and the Patreon commenter was right. The timeline is kind of wonky because, you know, technically the prequel is taking place in the Age of Heroes, but even then there's like debate as to whether or not that was 8,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or something. There's debate among the maesters as to exactly when it was. So there's play in time there. I think the important thing to remember is that, like, we're not going to be seeing the nice civilized Starks of Winterfell. Like, we're not going to be seeing, you know, brave Ned Stark and, you know, innocent Sansa Stark. We're going to be seeing like a pretty rough around the edges version of the Starks. And, you know, like I said, they have a pretty bloody and aggressive history. Of course, a lot of houses did in this time because, Robert, as you mentioned, you know, there's petty kings everywhere. And, you know, if you have the means to, you're trying to consolidate your power and everything. But it's not going to be House Stark as we know it. And I think that they I think we might be a little bit surprised at the Starks that we do see, because like I said, very kind of early rough around the edges version. We might be a little bit shocked by some of what we see, but that's just a guess.
Yeah, and I think I would kind of like characterize that as saying we're used to the Starks being the heroes in a way, that they're not always perfect, but we're kind of rooting for them. I don't think we necessarily have to assume that in the prequel they are going to be the heroes and the good guys. So I think that we'll have to completely reassess everything as to where our sympathies lie. We had some super chats. Thank you so much, Maura Lee. Before we went live, even thank you, Maura. You know how much your support means to me. Saying, in honor of Lord Ned Stark, looking forward to this discussion on House Stark and what the books might add to our current knowledge and understanding regarding each of the Stark family members, including Lady Stoneheart and Uncle Benjen. Yes, we'll get onto them in a little bit. Shadow Fox, thank you, saying for the tech issues, Robert, thank you. I think we're doing okay on the tech issues, actually. It seems to be working fine so far. I will try and get rid of the duck for future live streams. Stephen Stark saying, for all the great times we shared at the con. Yes, Stephen, it was fantastic meeting you at the con. We had a couple of fantastic chats. You are a great guy, it has to be said. I would highly recommend, if you ever run into Stephen Stark, you spend some time getting to know him. He is a good chap. So let's move on a little bit forward in time, but keep the comments coming about the sort of the Proto Starks and early Starks. But moving to just before the story, the Game of Thrones story, Brennan Barnes was asking for our thoughts on Lyanna Stark, the mother of Ned, saying essentially we know nothing about her other than her being a distant cousin to Rickard. So is the absence of information about her significant, as in like the words of House Dane, which for those who don't know, George R. R. Martin has said that he's deliberately kept the House Dane words back because they would be a bit spoilery. So also Brennan added on loving the Mountains of Madness on the Well-Told Tale. I will come to that in a bit. I'm also loving reading the Mountains of Madness. It's a fantastic story, but we'll come on to that in a moment. But let's get back to Lyanna Stark. So Ned's mother, we don't read huge amounts about her. Sam, do you think that's deliberate, or do you think that she is just like a not significant to the plot?
You know, I love this question because when I was looking at this in the notes, I was like, this is that thing that makes us question whether or not, you know, is the information as important because it's not there, or is it, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned about George having kept back House Dane's words for a long time. I honestly don't know, and I guess it depends on the circumstances, on the context. We also don't know House Celtigar's words, and I don't really think that they're as important as House Dane's. So, but yeah, I don't really know. I guess maybe at some point it could. I think I could be wrong here, but I think Old Nan says something to Bran at some point, actually about Lyanna Stark's mother, who was a Flint, Arya Flint. She says something that's the reason why you are so foolish about climbing, or something like that. I don't know. But I just don't know if that means anything, or if that's just George just can't resist being such a rich storyteller. That I don't know if we're meant to take anything away from that, or if it's just a nice little kind of detail dropped in there. But yeah, no, we know nothing about her, like you said. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to say that this is probably one of those times where the lack of extra information is just that, you know, there's only so much George R. R. Martin can tell us, and it's just when I sort of partway through, we paused it for a while. With Gemma, Secrets of the Citadel, we're doing sort of an ad hoc series of chats with like the incredibly catchy title of sort of second tier houses that we think are really cool and will probably have some kind of significant thing going on with them, but we don't know huge amounts about them. Catchy title, as I said. So we were looking at House Reed, and it struck me for the first time when I was doing that. Actually, we only know the names of 4 members of House Reed ever. Every other house, generally, we have like all these. Oh, and then like this legendary character and wherever, and the grandfathers of such and such, and all the rest of it. But House Reed, the oldest member, is Howland Reed. We don't know anything about his parents. We don't know anything about their history or any names. And that seems suspicious to me, but it might just be, you know what? They're not important. That we know roughly what House Reed have been doing all this time. We don't need to know the names of any individuals. And Ned's mother was probably important to him, but in terms of the plot, there are plenty of other characters who've got other really important roles there. So I'm tempted to just say, you know, on this one, although I'm the kind of guy who loves making theories out of random sentences and all the rest of it, I suspect it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I wonder if this is one of those things that, you know, if you ever said that to George R. R. Martin, if you were ever like, so what does it mean that we don't know anything about Lyanna Stark? He'd be like, I can't believe that that's like a thing, because I guarantee now like a whole theory is going to spring up around it.
Yeah.
And he would probably be like, wow, you guys are nerds.
Exactly. Yes. And we are.
I mean, we are.
It's just the true fact.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at sort of the next generation down. Meg's Problem says, I have to say thank you. I just started reading the books, and I love it when people start reading the books, because I've been prompting people to. That's fantastic. Not that far in yet, but I'm sure in the coming months I will have plenty of questions. I did notice in Catelyn's first chapter, she does see the significance of the dead direwolf and the antlers. I thought that was interesting. Now, we were having a little chat about this just before we went on air, and full disclosure, neither of us had a chance to look again at that, so I can't remember exactly what she said, but my gut instinct is that this is George R. R. Martin just trying to draw our attention to that, which we now look back on the antlers and the dead direwolf and the direwolf pups as being, obviously that's foreshadowing. I mean, how could it not be foreshadowing? But at the time, this is like chapter number 1, we didn't know how George R. R. Martin was writing the story, so he did have to kind of like point at things to tell us that they were going to be important. So my gut instinct here is that actually it's not that Catelyn had some kind of great insight into what was going on at kind of a meta level. This was just George as a writer pointing at stuff so that we, the readers, would be able to see things that were important. But did you have anything to add on to that one, Sam?
No, that's I think a perfect way to describe it, because like you said, especially for someone, reading the books for the first time and so early in the story. Yeah. I mean, sometimes we have to be, if not clubbed over the head with something, at least, prodded into it maybe. But I do love the fact that it's that we're seeing that realization from Kat, because Catelyn is just, she's such an incredible character, and I think so much more than some people give her credit for. And I think, I don't know if maybe George did that on purpose with showcasing like a mother's instinct type of thing. But Kat had a handle on a lot of really important kind of not like foreshadowing kind of things. You know what I mean? Like Kat was a very smart woman, and nothing got by her. And I think that was just kind of an early example of it. And I just always liked that detail there. So
yeah, and I always look at the chat in moments like these, because there are always people who know so much more than we do in the chat. Imren just says Catelyn saw it as an omen of danger. Yeah, so was. I mean, I think that speaks of her character as much as it does of what was going on there. Is that she was very protective of her family, and I think she was always looking out for where the problems are going to be coming from. So I think that in line with the kind of George R. R. Martin stereotypical, actually what matters less is the truth of the prophecy or foreshadowing or whatever. What matters more is how people react to it. I think that is showing us her reaction, and therefore a bit of her personality. But she was right, and perhaps one day I will do a live stream discussing how often Kat was right, because I know this is quite a controversial issue within the community, but more often than she's given credit for is my general feel.
I'd be happy to join you on that, because I'm a Catelyn defender, so I will.
You have thoughts. Excellent. Well, people are being triggered already by Catelyn Stark, so we should probably move on.
Okay.
Now let's talk about the children, the Stark children, so Ned and Kat's children. We've got a few questions at that kind of level, and we always have questions about Bran. So Maura Lee is asking about Bran, saying Bran in the show became the three-eyed raven. He was pulling the strings, putting all the chess pieces in place, and so on. Since there are characters like Lady Stoneheart and Rickon who are alive in the books but not on the show, do you think that Bran will be influencing what they do in the books? Now, it's just to tee this one up for you, Sam. So my take that I suspect I'm not unique in this, but so Bran on the show clearly seems to be the person who was, certainly in season 8, making sure everything happened exactly as he wanted it to. He saw where the end was, he's had the vision, and then he was just moving things around to it. If we take, and we shouldn't take everything in the show as being exactly as it's going to be in the books, but if we take the kind of feel that he is manipulating events, which I think is definitely going to happen, do you think that he's going to be manipulating those other characters within the Stark family?
I mean, I definitely think it's possible. Personally, I don't like the way that they went with, Bran was manipulating things the whole time and just setting everything up so that he could be king, which I know is, I guess, kind of what we're meant to take away from season 8, or at least like one of the theories there. I don't like that. I still kind of have a personal belief that Bran is still going to be a little bit more of an observer than a manipulator per se. And even if he does end up kind of, moving chess pieces around, so to speak, I don't know that it's going to be to the extent that it was in the show. Specifically, because I know this question dealt with Lady Stoneheart and Rickon. I really hate to say this, but I don't know that Rickon is going to be alive long enough for Bran to manipulate what happens to him. I know, please don't be mad at me, but I have thoughts about what's going to happen to Rickon, and they're not good. And I kind of don't want to see. I kind of don't want to see Lady Stoneheart's story influenced by Bran, because I think it would be a disservice to her story. It's such a good kind of. I'm not going to call it self-contained, because obviously it's not contained only to her. It's affecting lots of other people, but I don't really want to see that. I think it would be a disservice to the Stoneheart storyline. I can see him again more in that observer role, like kind of looking for, seeing what's happening, but hopefully not like outright influencing any of the events that are happening with it. I don't know how I feel about well, I know we're not talking about King Bran necessarily, so I'll stay away from that one. But I really do think that his development is going to be different in the books than they showed us in the show, and I think that his outcome apparently is still going to be the same. Oh, hi, my dog's here. Get down. I'm reserving judgment on how I feel about Bran's story and where it's going to go in the books. But like I said, I have hope that he's going to be more of an observer and less of a manipulator, as a very long way to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit the chapters that I'm most looking forward to in the next couple of books are the Bran ones, because if he is going to be taken over by the Weirwood Network in some way, if he's going to become the book equivalent of the Three-Eyed Raven, then his chapters will be absolutely mind-blowing, and I would completely understand why George R.R. Martin has to take a couple of decades to write them, because it's like, how do you write somebody who could access any bit of information anywhere in the world? Which doesn't make him an omniscient, by the way, the showrunners, for your season 8 script. That omniscient means you know everything, not that you have access to knowing everything. But that's a digression. But I think I would agree with you about the observing slightly more than the manipulating. In terms of Rickon, we'll get onto him in just a moment. Yes, I think that he is not going to be around for long enough to have to be manipulated, if that makes sense. He might be a little bit in terms of returning, because at the moment he's probably on Skagos, and will probably be returning to the Frey, and I hope that he will have more of an impact. I think his end will be the same, but I hope he'll have more of an impact. But as I say, we'll get onto him in just a second. Lady Stoneheart, I think, is she has got a very clear aim and objective, and I think in most ways she's almost non-manipulatable, if that makes sense. Is that she's very clear on what she wants to do, and she's going to go and do it. And really, you would just have to put the right things in front of her if you're wanting to be manipulating her, rather than trying to get her to do a different thing. So, yes, I think and again, it's not he. This is moving forward to the idea that this is the Weirwood Network, some kind of like composite him / Blood Ravens / whatever going on. I think that he will have a role doing some manipulation, but I don't think it's going to be quite to the same extent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I do hope that, there's a difference in the way that he's presented in the books versus the show, because I get why they kind of turn Bran into that like emotionless, robot Bran, but I don't really, and who knows, working under the Three-Eyed Raven and possibly being absorbed into the Weirwood net more completely. And yeah, that could definitely have that effect on anyone. But Bran is Bran's so like compassionate as a character. I mean, you can tell that from his POVs. And even when he's still, he's in his training and the last chapters that we read of his in A Dance with Dragons, he's still retaining a lot of his humanity, and I really don't want to see that wiped out. I don't like that they went that route for the show. I understand why they did it, but I don't love it, and I hope we don't really see that in the books to that extent. So
yeah, I mean, I sort of agree. For those who are asking where Dan the dog is, he's just down there somewhere. He's sort of asleep, giving me a side eye at the moment. Yeah, so I agree that Bran is a very sympathetic character in the books. He cares about people a whole lot more. But at the same time, he has a very uncaring attitude, particularly towards Hodor. And there's some very clear sort of language when it's talked about Hodor is, when Bran goes into Hodor's mind, Hodor is cowering in the corner, effectively. Bran is physically pushing him out of the way and doing whatever he wants with his body, which isn't this kind of caring, compassionate person. And he's a child. He probably doesn't understand exactly what he's doing, but at the same time, I think that we can't just say that he is this pure, innocent, nice person. He has got an element to him which is quite merciless and uncaring, I have to say. Okay, let's move on. We've been talking about Bran, so about Rickon. So let's talk about. So Kimmerbridge says, can Rickon have a slightly better death? A unicorn question. Are there any hints in his name and his wolf's name? So I'll go with the wolf's name thing, and then we'll. Very happy for your views because you clearly have views on this. So the Starks' fate, the fate of the Stark children seems to be bound up in this foreshadowy way with the names of their direwolves. So we get, for example, we have Ghost being Jon's direwolf. This is a clear foreshadowing that he's going to die and then come back from the dead in some way. We get Lady. We'll get onto this later, I'm sure, but that I think is clear foreshadowing that Sansa is going to end up a lady. Nymeria was a warrior, and I think that's clearly Arya is being a warrior. Rickon's direwolf is called Shaggy Dog, and a Shaggy Dog story is a long and complicated and winding story that is quite interesting as you go along, but fundamentally ends in a kind of anticlimactic, not really that important way. And that is exactly what happened on the show, is that he was there, he was going along, you were thinking, is this going to turn into something? And actually it didn't. He didn't even get a single word to say in that last episode, poor guy.
Very unfair.
It was slightly unfair. So I think that high level, he is going to have the same ending, in that he will die in a kind of like I hate to say meaningless way, but it's not going to, his death is not going to advance the plot in any significant way. But do you have any speculation? I'm going to assume you roughly agree with that, but
I do.
Do you have any speculation on how that might happen?
Not exactly, no. I mean, I definitely don't have like an outline of like ways that Rickon might die. I'm pretty positive. And I don't think it's really a stretch. I think that, you know, a lot of people might agree that, like you said, it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion, but, you know, we have to look at like all of the other roles that the Stark children have played so far, and we assume still have left to play. And with Rickon, you really just find yourself wondering, like, because he's been gone for a lot, like he's so young, you know, it's just, he hasn't really had a role like anyone else has. And I like your analogy about how, you know, all of the other direwolf names have such importance, except for Shaggy Dog. It's not really, it's the name that a child gives their pet, which is what Rickon is. And that's kind of, I think, yeah, very indicative of the fact that, you know, a child can kind of only see so far. And that's kind of why, and Arya's not that much older than Bran or than Rickon, but even she kind of, was a little bit more like she knew this like great story about this warrior because she identified with her and everything. And that's why she named her direwolf that. Rickon, I mean, yeah, he's very young when he gets his direwolf, but like he doesn't really see any further than just like, this is my dog and he's Shaggy. So I think that kind of also speaks to like, an abrupt end to his story. And I think it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility that it would be like a tragic accident kind of thing. Like you said, not really something that's going to further the plot, but something that would kind of fit in with that. There's plenty of dangers on Skagos that we know of. And even maybe possibly en route back to Winterfell. I mean, the North is a dangerous place. So I foresee tragic accident.
So, for those who aren't book people, he's off on this island of Skagos, which is nobody really knows huge amounts about. There are rumors of unicorns. There's rumors of cannibalism. There's huge amounts of just a craggy landscape there. And Davos, who's on a slightly different arc, he's hunting for him to go and try and bring him back. Now, we think seen him through one of Jon's, all of the Stark children are getting sort of direwolf dreams where they're kind of like this sort of skin changing while they're asleep. And we see through Ghost, who sees what Shaggy Dog's doing, we just see this kind of hint about what might be going on. George R.R. Martin has also, separate to this, kind of hinted that we're going to see unicorns sort of. Now, my take, again, I think I'm not unique in this, is that this is almost certainly goats with one horn, big shaggy goats with one horn, which are on Skagos. And so it would not surprise me if Rickon comes back with Davos and Shaggy Dog, and somewhere either on the journey or at the end of the journey, he dies in a kind of meaningless way. The battles for Winterfell on the show, I lost count of how many battles for Winterfell they had. There were lots of them. In the books, we have to remember Winterfell is already, and the area around Winterfell already is almost impassable. We're not going to have just army after army coming up to Winterfell, lots of people going about all over the place. It is really, really hard work getting it. We've got like snowdrifts 30, 40 feet high. We've got all but one of the gates to Winterfell are frozen shut and they just cannot open them. This is completely different to what it looked like on the show. So Rickon getting to Winterfell in the first place is going to be a really, really tough ask all the way across the north. So don't know exactly how. I in my mind, he gets there and then just dies in some horrible freak accident in some battle or something, and it's just like, oh well, thanks Davos, you did a whole lot of good work there, but it was for nothing. Unfortunately, I think I don't hold out much hope. Now, just as a complete aside, George R.R. Martin today was in London at an event and was answering questions from the audience. I unfortunately couldn't make it there, but I did have a couple of spies, at least one of whom is now in the chat. So if George did say anything exciting, please do drop it in the chat and I will try and share it with people. But we're sort of nearly halfway through. Sam, let's I always say this. I only ever invite people on here if I will personally recommend what they do. Could you just tell people what is it that you do, the Night's Cast and other things?
Sure. So the Night's Cast is the official podcast of WatchersOnTheWall.com. Watchers on the Wall is your official source for all things Thrones. I mean, obviously we cover things related to the books. We just haven't had much of that lately. But anything related to the show. So any casting news, filming news, prequel news, we're covering all of that. It was great for a couple of weeks. We had a lot of news coming out because the pilot was still being filmed. Since it's wrapped up a few weeks ago, it's been crickets. Like we have heard nothing. But we've got great, fantastic sources all over the place, and they're sending us info as soon as they hear it, and as soon as we hear it, we report it. So if you do want to know anything about the prequel, if you want to stay spoiler free, totally understand. But please do follow us on the website. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter at Watchers OT Wall. And the Night's Cast is our official podcast, which I am one of the hosts of, and we kind of look back at we do an episode roughly every 2 weeks. We look back at recent stories. We kind of like recap if you haven't had a time to visit the website recently. But we are actually going to start a deeper dive into the world of Ice and Fire, so we can kind of talk about some of this earlier history happening in Westeros, so that people are up to speed whenever the prequel starts. But yeah, it's just something that we love to do, and I love being a part of it. So.
Excellent. Well, I will. The people are putting links down in the chat. Thank you so much, moderators. I always say I have fantastic moderators here. Thank you so much for this. And I will put a link down in the description after we've come off air. That was really interesting what you're saying. So just headlines in terms of the prequel. We are expecting it to be greenlit. As far as I'm yep. So, and do we know what sort of timescale we're looking at then in terms of when we might see it?
We don't really know, but I mean, if you want me to speculate, I'm happy to. I would guess that we won't see this on our screens until at the very earliest, like the end of 2020. So like the end of probably next year, because we're already in August of 2019. Yeah, I definitely don't see the pilot not getting greenlit, because how it works usually with any TV show is, the show is pitched to the network greenlights a pilot, which is basically just an episode, like usually the first episode. They see the finished product. If they like it, they greenlight the series as a whole, and then they film the rest of the first season. Definitely can't see that not happening at HBO, because this is so highly anticipated. But they would still have to film the rest of the first season. And we don't know how many episodes it could be 8, it could be 10. They have to film all of that. They have to do post-production on all of that. I would assume they're probably a little bit ahead of the game, because again, I think everyone's assuming that the pilot will be greenlit. So I don't know if scripts are already written for the rest of the season. I would think maybe people are at least getting a head start on it. But like no other directors have been announced or anything for episodes. So I would say like at the earliest end of next year, I think is when we could see this. And it might even be early 2020. I don't think HBO wants to rush it either. 2021, no. Sorry. I don't think they want to rush it. So
no, I mean, I think that sounds fair. I mean, if you just take on the how Game of Thrones used to work, it was like on a yearly cycle. So yeah. If you assume that if you're going at things a normal speed, you would expect a series to be, or season to be written, filmed, post-production, and then out within the year. So the countdown, as far as I'm concerned, starts when they say filming is starting on the rest of the season, and that point
right.
It's roughly a year would be where it's at. So yeah, that's my general takes. But yeah, I think that makes sense to me that it'll be late next year, possibly early the year after that. Yeah. And the spies are starting to report back from George R. R. Martin, and as expected, nothing exciting to report. He did confirm that Fire and Blood got released early for prequel stuff, and nothing exciting. So stand down, everyone. No big announcements.
Okay. You mean he didn't just decide to drop the release date of Winds of Winter while no one was expecting it?
Sadly not. No, it was. It sounds very very well stage managed. When he was I think he was probably just having a few days layoff in London before heading over to Dublin for Worldcon. So
I was really hoping to have Winds of Winter to read on maternity leave at the end of the year, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen. So
no, I mean, I'm trying to work out at which point I give up on my long held prediction of November this year. I'm almost ready. Not quite yet. Almost ready.
Keep the faith, Robert. We will keep the faith.
I know. He's nearly that close.
I know.
Okay. Let's go back to a few questions. And we were working our way through some of the Stark children. Now, we had a couple of questions quite similar about Arya. Saying Maura Lee saying that Arya is in the books still training with the Faceless Men. Who will she kill in the books? And then Bonds says a slightly different take on it. What about the Faceless Men rule that they can't kill someone that they know? How will this play out for Arya? Does this mean that she's going to be given a target to kill of someone that she does know and then not be able to do it? So I'll sort of pick up on this one first. Perhaps, Sam, if in a moment you sort of answer the bit about who she might kill. So my take on the Faceless Men rule, for those who don't know it, it's mentioned a couple of times, but most obviously in the book she goes down and she's like serving at this sort of meeting of Faceless Men deep down underground in the House of Black and White, and they're kind of divvying up contracts and they're saying, oh, do you want to kill John? Somebody's got to kill John. And this person pipes in and says, no, I know John, I can't kill him. So they give the job to somebody else. And it's sort of, you can't, if you're a Faceless Man, you can't kill someone that you know. Now, there's as an entirely tangential takeaway, this means that the Faceless Men are not no one, because they still know people. They are still them. They're not just like this faceless mask of nothingness. They are still who they were to start with. So this idea that Arya is training to get rid of everything about who she is actually is not true, because the Faceless Men who are there doing the assassinations still retain memories of who they know and all the rest of it. But that's, as I say, that's a slight tangent. The question as to whether or not this is kind of hinting at the idea that Arya might be told to kill someone that she knows, I think actually the way that's framed is that she wouldn't be asked to kill somebody that she already knows. But it's kind of teeing up, I suspect, the same kind of thing that we saw on the show, is that there has to be a reason for her to be leaving Bravos at the end of it. And on the show, it's that she just decided effectively to go against what she was told to do. She was told to kill somebody and decided she didn't want to, because that was against her morals and who she was as a person. She was a Stark, and this person didn't deserve to die and all the rest of it. And I suspect it's teeing up something along those lines. Whether it's going to be the exact same thing, I suspect it won't be the exact same thing, but it's going to be something along those lines, that she finds that she cannot kill somebody that she deems should not be killed. So I think that's where that's heading, rather than her being given some commission to kill a character. Like, I know, Bonds, you were talking about maybe she'll be told to kill Sam. I don't think that she's going to be told to kill somebody, a character that we know. I think when she returns to Westeros, she is going to be back being freelance Arya, killing who she wants to kill on her list. At which point, Sam, I'll throw over to you. Who do you think? Obviously, we know who she killed on the show. She went and it was Walder Frey and all the Freys, and there was Littlefinger and all the rest of it. Who do you think she's going to be killing in the books? Because she's going to kill someone, because she's been trained to be a kick-ass assassin. Of course, she has to kill at least somebody. Who is she going to kill?
You know what? That's a very good question. And it is interesting, that the scene in the books you mentioned about how, it's this council of the Faceless Men sitting around, oh, I can't kill so-and-so, I know so-and-so, which, like you said, means they're really not no one. And that's something that, there's this big emphasis put on that in the show. Obviously, we don't have that scene in the show. It's not, it doesn't happen. So yeah, it's definitely showing us kind of a different side of it. I have a theory that Arya isn't necessarily, she's still obviously going to leave the House of Black and White, but she is, rather than leaving on her own volition, I think that she is going to maybe almost like be handed a mission by them to leave. I haven't really fully formed like the context of it or anything yet. But I think that somehow or another it's going to be determined that Arya has a bigger purpose, and the people at the House of Black and White are going to recognize that and be like, okay, go on your merry way. As to who she's going to kill, sorry if my mic is picking that up. My dog's playing with a rawhide right behind me. That's a very good question. I think Walder Frey is still an option. I really was hoping that Arya would be the one to kill Cersei. I don't know if that's going to happen in the in the books, but it's something that I would like to see. And would you be sorry? So I'll be honest. That's something that I'm still kind of formulating my opinions on as to who I think she's going to kill in the books. So, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So my general take is that she is going to head out, and the Faceless Men will be happy for her to go, because at least a couple of the people on her list are people that they want dead anyway. Mm-hmm. So I did a series coming up to a couple of years ago, a video series on the Faceless Men and actually what they believe. And we get these, what we treat as kind of cool catchphrases, actually are statements of faith. All men must die, is actually what they believe. They believe everyone has to die. And so the moment that you get something that is making sure that people do not die, that is actually to their faith an abomination. So what we're looking at is the Mountain is, in their eyes, somebody who should have died and didn't. And so I think they would be very happy for Arya, the Mountain is on her list, to go off and try and kill the Mountain. Cersei, similarly, is somebody who is enabling this kind of thing. And I don't think, incidentally, Qyburn's done there. The Mountain was the prototype. I think he's going to carry on creating this kind of thing. So I think they would also be happy for her to be going out and trying to kill Cersei as well. So I think that they're very happy for her to go off and do this. As an aside, yes, this means the Faceless Men have got a whole load of other groups of people that they'll be very happy to stop doing what they're doing, because they're bringing people back from the dead when they shouldn't be coming back from the dead. But that's, as I say, that's an entire aside. Arya will be coming back, I think, to complete her list. Now, the Walder Frey thing, I do personally wonder whether, well, there's two elements here. Lady Stoneheart is, I think, going to take some of Arya's revenge plot on. It would not surprise me if she takes out the Freys, because she's got the personal anger about the Freys. That's who she's asking about, even more than anything else. Is about the Freys. Yes, she wants Jaime Lannister. The Lannisters have wronged her, but it's the Freys who actually, it just gets her. So it would not surprise me if she goes for that. The second thing is the Chekhov super pack of wolves, which is Arya is still very, very closely linked to Nymeria, her direwolf. In the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, Arya's pre-release chapter called Mercy, it starts with her waking up from a dream when she was being Nymeria, and she tastes the blood in her mouth and all the rest of it. So I think there's a very good chance that the super pack of wolves will be taking on some of the people that Arya wants killed, and that is another way that Arya is going to be killing people on her list. So Arya will be killing people. She will be killing important people. She will not kill the Night King, because the Night King does not exist in the books. Therefore, we have to ask, who are the important people left who she might kill? One of them is potentially Littlefinger. Another one is potentially Cersei. So I think that's where I'm going with that. I don't think she's going to go down this kind of very humanizing route that she went on the show when she suddenly became nice again. She went off and trained to be an assassin who doesn't care and just wants to kill lots of people, and then suddenly she becomes nice again. I don't think that's where she's going down a very dark route, and yes, she will probably not end up in the very dark place, but she's not going to suddenly be this nice person who's like hugging Jon and going off on her own little adventures and all the rest of it. It's going to be quite a dark ending for her.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that idea about the mountain, because, you know, the Faceless Men, to them, it's an abomination if someone who was supposed to die didn't actually die. And I'm totally on board with that theory. I love that.
Excellent. And Jojo Lady Dane, one of my excellent moderators and my other spy in the George R. R. Martin event, says, my favorite thing from tonight, George said if he could have any sword, he would have Dawn. Obviously, just adding to the list of things that are curious about House Dane. Thank you, Jojo.
I think he also said that his favorite dragon is Balerion, and I'm just like, Sheepstealer gets no respect. Like, I don't know why. I have a soft spot for Sheepstealer because she's just like she, he, it, whatever. She's such a misfit, misunderstood.
I mean, I like mutton. I mean, it's like fine, okay, yeah. Respect for Sheepstealer. Okay, I think Balerion's a boring answer. Sorry, George. It's like just because Balerion's the biggest and most impressive dragon. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to some questions. Maura and Bonds, I hope that answered that about Arya. Anne Clough is asking about Sansa. And we have Sansa Snark here, so I'm assuming, Sam, you'll have lots of views on this one. Hi, Robert. In a recent video, you said you believe Sansa will, in fact, end up Lady of Winterfell. Yeah, this was the video I did, I think, last week, called something like 10 Ways the Books Will End the Same as the Show. I'm going to do a sequel to that, incidentally, next week, called 10 Ways the Books Will End Differently to the Show, just to kind of do a bit of balance. But yes, one of the ways that I think they will be the same is that Sansa will end up as Lady of Winterfell, perhaps even Queen of the North, but definitely Lady of Winterfell. So the question from Anne about Sansa was, I'm wondering how you think this will affect the Seven Kingdoms. Will the North become a separate kingdom ruled by the Starks, or will Sansa be Warden of the North, and will there be a difference? So what do you reckon, Sam? Will Sansa end up in roughly the same place that she did on the show in the books, and if so, what does that mean?
So I really want, obviously, to see Sansa as Queen of the North in the books, the same way that it happened in the show. But, you know, circumstances were definitely different in the show. Hang on, sorry, my dogs are going crazy. Hey, cut it out. Literally, fur is flying right now. They're just, if this is distracting to anyone, I'm so sorry.
It's not coming through too badly. Don't worry. Just keep talking.
Good. Yes. So obviously, I would love to see her as Queen of the North in the books as well. But the circumstances are obviously going to be pretty different. I think that it is. I'm going to temper my expectations as far as Queen of an independent North goes. And I'm going to say that I think will probably end up as like Warden of the North. It also kind of depends on the circumstances of King Bran, which, you know, which Isaac Hempstead-Wright told us that Dave and Dan told him that George R. R. Martin told them that's endgame for Bran. But it depends on how he gets there and what kind of whether or not then becoming an independent kingdom again. I don't know. There is a path, I think, to that in the books. I just am not 100% sure on it yet. And
okay, the Huskies at war is happening.
There are dire wolves literally fighting in my living room right now. I think it's a little bit more likely at this point that she'll be warden or wardeness of the North, not necessarily of an independent kingdom. But again, that there's a lot that on Sansa's part of the story that depends on what ends up happening with Jon and with King Bran, which apparently now is going to be endgame. I think that it depends on whether or not Jon is still alive, whether or not he refuses any kind of rule. But like I said, I'm going to temper my expectations, but I still think absolutely that Sansa's going to end up in a ruling position of power. I think that she's going to end up resettling the new gift, which is something that I think Ned had talked about even. So I think I have very high hopes for Sansa, and I think the path will be similar, but definitely not the same as it's going to be as they gave us in the show. I really do want a scene in the books of them yelling Queen of the North and, saluting her with their swords, but I don't know if we'll be lucky enough to quite get there. So,
yeah, I think I would agree 100% with that. I think that she is definitely on the same arc to being a proper player of the game and to being the Lady of Winterfell. I can see that even just in her own POV chapters, we can see her thinking starting to change to be more strategic, to be actually realizing, Tyrion wasn't that bad. Out of all the people I've been attached to in some way, he was actually okay, looking past the sort of the external stuff that she was quite obsessed with to start with, starting to think strategically. So the arc is clearly there in the books, so I think she will end up in roughly the same place, because actually the logistics are going to be the same. If we're all agreed that Rickon is dying at some point soon, Bran is not going to be taking over the mantle. He's gone to be a tree wizard in some way. Jon is going to turn out not to be who everybody thought he was to start with. Arya's never going to be taking on the crown, and Robb is obviously dead. So who's left? Just Sansa. So yeah. The maths just adds up to her ending up ruling the North in some way. As I said, I think it's pretty evens in my mind whether or not the North does split off. I don't think it makes huge amounts of difference in terms of her character arc as to where she ends up.
Yeah. And I mean, she's still going to end up, I think, forcing Littlefinger's hand kind of the way that she does in the show. Not necessarily, how it happens in the show is she, makes the Knights of the Vale ride into the Battle of the Bastards, which, yeah, that's all show stuff there. So I think she is still going to end up forcing his hand, though. I think that she's, and like you said, from her POV chapters, we can tell she's just she's coming into her own so much more. Like with every week that goes by, it seems she's just learning more, she's growing more. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what the relationship ends up being between like the Vale and the North, because there's also this is semi-canon book stuff, but bad blood in between the Starks and parts of the Vale, so it'll be interesting.
Yes. And so I think we're agreed on this one, to be honest, and definitely when I agree with my guest, because I always only ever invite very clever people on, and so when I agree with them, it makes me feel good. Stephen Lucy, thank you so much for the super chat, saying just an appreciation super chat for another great stream. Binge watching your live streams with all your amazing guests has been keeping me going at work this week. Thank you. I do only have excellent guests on, so thank you so much. Incidentally, guys, I don't know whether another random thing, which I got told that super stickers have been enabled on my channel, and I have absolutely no idea what super stickers are. I assume they're like a version of super chats. I'm not asking anyone to do a super sticker, but if you can see what a super sticker is, I would be intrigued to know. So thank you. But thank you very much, Stephen, for that super chat. That's very much appreciated. I'm glad you're enjoying the live streams. Let's have a question from Donna Daly, who says, hi, Robert. I'm never quite sure whether Jon questions are appropriate for Stark Q&A. Yeah, fair enough. However, since he has as much Stark blood as any of the other Stark children, I'm guessing it's fair. Do you think there is any significance to Jon being in the care of an uncle, sort of, until only months before he is killed at the end of the books we have? So, I mean, I'll sort of start on that. I don't think the uncle thing is the significant thing here. I think that there's an echoing of Jon and Daenerys and also Tyrion to an extent, with the fact that their mothers died in childbirth. They never knew their father, really. Tyrion, obviously, it depends on whether you buy into the idea that Aerys might have been his father, but they died, before certainly for Jon and Daenerys died before they knew them, and that sort of both shapes them as people because they're being brought up by people who are not their parents, and they're being reacting to those. So Ned is a huge influence on Jon, perhaps even more than he would have been if he'd been his actual father. And Daenerys is reacting against what the person who brought her up, which is Viserys, her brother, was about, starting out obviously sort of believing everything he said, but slowly but surely coming into herself. So there's that echo there that, as I say, you can sort of see it in Tyrion as well. I don't think the fact that it is an uncle per se that brought him up that is the significant issue here. But I'd be interested in your thoughts there, Sam. Is there anything that you, in the sort of the uncle relationship, that you'd see there?
Not really. I think you hit the nail on the head with the fact that, you know, the parallels between Jon and Dany and the fact that they never really knew their at least one parental figure. Like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess neither one of them ever knew either of their parents. But they're both characters who seem to like, they collect parental figures in other forms instead. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's meaningful per se that it's an uncle that, you know, he has in Benjen, because it's still, I guess, to Jon it's just a father figure, another kind of teacher or mentor kind of figure that he ends up collecting. So yeah, no, I would agree with you. I don't know that there's any significance to the fact that it's an uncle. Not particularly. So yeah, I would agree with you.
Excellent. I'm just covering a quick flick through the chat. People seem to be as confused as I am by the super stickers. Apparently it's under the normal super chat. So there you go. Feel free to use that on anyone where it's enabled. But thank you for that. I was say it was one of these things that just flashed up just before it went live, saying super stickers are now enabled, and I went, I don't even know what they are. Morally, thank you so much, very kind, saying thoroughly enjoying the live stream. Thank you to you both. Thank you. And friendly neighborhood nitpicker. Thank you for the super chat, saying Walder Frey hires Faceless Man to kill Stoneheart. Are ya? So would Walder Frey hire the Faceless Men to kill Lady Stoneheart? No, I don't think so. I don't. At the moment, she's kind of like hiding in the shadows to start with, so I don't think that he would even know that she's there. But what do you think, Sam?
No, Lady Stoneheart is still kind of, you don't know she's there until it's too late kind of thing. Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see a hit being put out on Lady Stoneheart. It's almost more, and I see Walder Frey as being the type of person anyway who would like hear this story about her and kind of brush it off at first. You know what I mean? Like, story. Yeah, I don't. No, doesn't work for me.
Okay. Good. I think we're agreed on that one. Okay, let's move on to looking at a few sort of slightly bigger issues about House Stark. People still talking about the sticker thing. I think it might just be on computers. Just looking at the chat, so if you're on a laptop, then Kraken Tacos is saying there are no Kraken stickers.
Oh,
sorry, sad times. But I think it might just be if you're on a laptop rather than watching it on your mobile or anything like that. From what people are saying, Morally saying for House Stark and the Northern Lords on the TV show, the big threat was from the Night King and the White Walkers. Once the Night King was defeated, then Jon could turn his attention down south. How do you think the threat from the others will play out in the books? How will they get defeated, and so on? What do you... I mean, this is a big question. It comes up a lot, but what's your sort of overall take on what's going to happen with the others in the books? It won't be exactly the same as the show because, like, the showrunners have said that they made up the character of the Night King, and then they
Mhm.
had to decide who's going to kill the Night King, and so none of that bit is going to happen. But clearly they are going to be moving down south, and clearly Winterfell's important. So what's your sort of gut instinct?
So this is really interesting because I personally believe that this is I want to give credit where credit is due, because it's all based on a wonderful essay by Stephen Adwell from his blog. Hang on, I want to plug it. racefortheironthrone.wordpress.com. The King's Landing Endgame, book versus show, because he made a very good argument. And this, when he wrote this, I think maybe it was like a year or so ago, he made a very good argument that I haven't been able to get out of my head since then, that the events of in the show, we saw the fight with the others, and then we saw King's Landing. He made a very good argument for the fact that those events are going to be flipped, and the King's Landing conflict is going to happen first, and then the battle with the others, the War for the Dawn, is going to happen second. If that's the case, and I won't go into too much detail about why he thinks so, but again, it's really, really good stuff. Dany is going to, I think, survive what happens in King's Landing, and that's how she's going to end up going north to fight the others, and I think she is going to also have a very big role in it, like she did in the show. Obviously same or different circumstances, different context of her getting there. So I think that she's going to have a big role to play in it. Obviously it doesn't mean that the Starks are not. There's, the theory that the others are actually descended from the Starks. So there's the sense that there might be like this kind of familial conflict, I think, between the two of them, which would be really interesting. Was there also a part of this question about the Horn of Winter, I think?
Yes.
Or
so
no?
I mean, this is kind of like probably judging from more, this was sort of my one of my big videos is about the concept that the Horn of Winter might well be used to raise the dead of Winterfell. So that might be the context there. But I'm delighted to hear your thoughts on the Horn of Winter.
Well, actually, I'm not. At times, I think that the Horn of Winter is a red herring, but then I'm also tempted to think that it is going to be really important. The raising of the Stark dead, I think, might be pretty important, because if it happens in the books, which I think that there's a chance that it will, it's going to be the opposite of what happened in the show, where in the show, the Stark dead were raised by the Night King because he was, he can do that, obviously, just raise anyone who's died, even if it is people from generations ago. But I think that if it happens in the books, there's the chance that it will actually be to the benefit of the living Starks who were there at Winterfell. But that's kind of just a theory that I have. So yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead.
No. I mean, I think that just picking up on the theory that you were talking about what happened at King's Landing and what's happening in Winterfell the other way around. I am of the view that yes, but there will be another thing at King's Landing at the end as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, yeah. The books aren't going to end.
My kind of so my overall take is that in the books, we've already got this big invasion which is happening with Aegon the VI, who's, I think, going to take King's Landing. He has got the Golden Company with him, probably will soon have Dawn with him. The Golden Company will have elephants. So I think that they will take King's Landing. I think they will push out the Lannisters. I think Dany will then arrive. Probably before that, there'll be an outbreak of grayscale or something horrible like that going on. I think Dany will then arrive at King's Landing and be faced with Aegon, who is being backed by Varys and Dawn and a huge amount of other things going on there. It wouldn't surprise me if the Hightowers got in on the act as well. So that's going to be the initial situations that are happening there. There will be the confrontation there, and what happens with Dany may well happen in that context. Then she will have to go and face up with what's going on in the north. And then we have this scouring of the Shire feel of, once the big battles happened, we then have to go back, and our battered, broken heroes have to face off against one final enemy. Just when they thought that they'd cleared everything out, they've got one last enemy who is likely to be some combination of Euron and Cersei, in my view. So that's the kind of the iteration broadly that I can see it at the moment. I will probably either later this year or early next year, certainly before the Winds of Winter, I will come out with a series of videos setting out what I think the shape of the sort of the end game in the books is going to be. But that's sort of the high level stuff going on there. So, which takes us away slightly from the others. I think that the Horn of Winter, for long, complicated reasons, I did in my video, which is called something like the Horn of Winter and the Crypts of Winterfell, if you want to look for it. But I think that will raise the Stark dead. I think that they will fight on the side of the Starks. I think that's the whole point why they've been stacked up there generation after generation after generation, because they are then going to be raised in a Dead Men of Dunharrow way, for Lord of the Rings fans, to be fighting on behalf of the humans against the others. Now, I think that the final battle is going to happen down, however, at the Isle of Faces. That, I think, is the most symbolically important thing that's going to be happening there. And I am still holding out hope that George R.R. Martin is not going to have the solution to this great story of how grabbing for power and fighting is terrible and ruins so many lives. He is not going to have the answer to it all being one big battle and whoever's the best fighter wins. So I'm holding out hope that there is going to be another way that is going to be found, possibly linked in with the Isle of Faces, possibly linked in with the original pact, and possibly linked in with how do we undo what original magic sort of made the others happen in the first place. And if you can undo that original magic, that seems to be what they were trying to get at with Arya killing the Night King. But I think it will be done in a way that is not just an assassin killing the big baddie. So that's my general take about where that's going to be. It's a matter of undoing it. And the show was kind of hinting at it, I think, with the swirly signs. I know everyone got very excited. I got very excited about the swirly signs on fire. But I think that what they were trying to show, and it got missed amidst all the how on earth did Arya get there, what on earth's going on stuff in episode 3. But they were trying to show that the way that the White Walkers were created was with dragonglass in the heart in front of a weirwood tree, and the way that they were uncreated was Valyrian steel in the heart next to a weirwood tree. And they were trying to show that there's some symmetry there with them being uncreated. It wasn't just killing, it was uncreating. So I think that is the key to it, but that uncreation will look different in the books.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the Isle of Faces, because I agree with you 100% that at least I hope at least that we're going to make it there, and that, you know, it is going to be this kind of uncreation or this undoing of magic. Because one of my things that I thought we were going to see in the show, and I guess maybe sort of kind of we did, well, not really in some ways, but the ending of magic, because things, you know, are in the books. What I'm hoping for is that, you know, things are going to come to a very definitive end in Westeros, in the sense that, like, this is how things used to be, and that has fundamentally changed now, and magic is going to be a big part of that. I mean, I think Dany's dragons are all probably going to die. We're not going to have any more of them, and that's kind of going to be tied to it, because the dragons returning have, you know, brought magic back again stronger. But I think that it's somehow or another, and the uncreation part, I love that idea of it, because that is going to kind of, that's going to end magic. And maybe Bran might be like the last bastion of it. You know what I mean? He's going to be, and I think he even says in the show, you know, I'm this world's memories or whatever. He's going to be like the last memory of magic. And he may end up living in a heart tree on the Isle of Faces forever and ever. But, you know, aside from that, him as like the last scion of it, the last remembrance of it, magic is going to be gone in Westeros. No more dragons, no more White Walkers, no more, you know, it's going to be gone. No more glass candles burning.
I don't think it's all going to be gone, personally, but I think that it's going to be pushed back. That's my general take. I'm just catching up on the fact that people in the chat seem to have discovered the stickers, which is very exciting. So I said that I'm using a slightly different system here. They do not appear on this new thing that I've got going on in front of me, which is what, if I've missed some, I apologize, but I can see Terry Smith, thank you so much, has got one of, is that a fox? I don't know, but it seems it's nice. I like it. Yeah, so thank you guys. They seem to be $2. I don't know whether they're all $2, but that's very kind. Have fun with them. They are enabled, and I'm sure they will be enabled on other people's live streams as well. So have fun with them on other people's live streams too. Okay, I'm smiling at that. That's good. Okay, so anyway, Lady S saying, super chat saying, happy birthday to me. Thanks for the great live stream. Lady S, happy birthday. I hope you're having a great day. And that's Canadian dollars, so you've still got a bit of the evening to go. Stephen Lucy saying, bump for Carl Karsnarks. I don't know whether that's actually Karsnark or whether actually Karstark's question. How will Lady Stoneheart re-die? Will she be a mere ghoul, or will she take out a true bad guy? So first of all, I love it, guys, when people do super chats on behalf of other people, because I know not everyone can afford to do super chats, and it makes them stand out, and it means that we get to see them here. So thank you so much. That's very kind of you, Stephen. So Carl's question, how will Lady Stoneheart re-die? Where will she take out a true bad guy? So what I was saying earlier is that I have a feeling that she might be the person to take out Walder Frey, which is going to be strategically important, because they've got they're holding the river. I mean, we saw that season of book 1. It was really important getting on the right side of the Freys, because they held the only crossing of the river, the only way to get from east to west Westeros for hundreds of miles. I think that she will probably be the person who gets rid of Walder Frey. And I think in terms of her re-dying, we have to sort of reset what her character arc is and forget what Catelyn was about. What's left now is this desire for vengeance for the wrongs done to House Stark. And specifically, she thinks the deaths of her children. Now, I think that therefore her arc will end, so to speak, when she has killed the people who she counts as responsible, which I think specifically will be the Freys. And also when she discovers that actually, you know what, her children aren't dead. Yes, Rob is, and yes, Rickon will be, but you know, that's not really the point. The point is that Sansa, she'll been told has gone missing, but actually suddenly Sansa will reappear. Arya will at some point return. Yes, there's a kind of a fake Arya thing going up in the north, but she will see through that. Bran and Rickon, she thinks, are dead, but that will come out soon through Theon, I have no doubt, and she will discover actually that all the wrongs done to her family, she's not overstating them, but not all the people she thought were dead are actually dead. So I think that is where it is. And I think where it seemed with Beric was that he just sort of almost gave up. And I think that will probably be the same with her, is that she'll get to the point where actually she will feel herself mission accomplished, so to speak. But what do you reckon, Sam?
I couldn't agree more. And what's funny is, like, as you were saying this, and I'm envisioning that wonderful scene that they gave us in season 8 at the end of episode 3, where you see Melisandre just walking off into the distance to just kind of slowly lay down and die. I don't know if that it just made me think of you know, fulfilling a purpose and knowing that your purpose has been fulfilled, and then you're gone. Like, Lady Stoneheart knows, I think, as much as she can anyway, that she has been she's been brought back, she has the second chance to do something very specific. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about, is Bran going to influence her storyline? And that's why I don't think so, because, you know, it is so specific to Stoneheart, you know, the actions that she's going to undertake and what her end game is going to be. And yeah, I think as soon as her mission is accomplished, which is taking revenge on the Freys, I think that kind of like finding out that the children that she thought were lost or dead are actually not, is going to be like icing on the cake, I guess. Maybe that is the thing that's going to trigger, you know, her demise again. But yeah, I think it's going to definitely be a case of, you know, she feels that her purpose has been fulfilled and she's out. So
excellent. Good. I agree. And I've just seen that Stephen Stark sent a unicorn sticker. Sanrixian sent a doggo sticker. And there might be more. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Sanri. Those are good stickers, by the way. They've got unicorns and doggos. Those are good stickers. Thank you very much. And guys, if you sent a sticker and I missed it, I'm really sorry. But thank you so much. That's very kind. As I say, I'm going to blame the technology. I should have checked that beforehand, but it was all slightly last minute, suddenly learning that they YouTube weren't supporting the Hangouts anymore. But anyway, thank you so much. That's very kind. I think we also got another couple of super chats. Let me just double check quickly. Someone called VK Cole Art. Hi, Vanessa. Vanessa, big friend of the channel, and will, I hope, be coming on next week. We haven't decided what we're going to talk about yet, but she is always excellent and is a fantastic artist. And somewhere up there is a picture of hers that is always looks really a long way away, but I can assure you up close it's brilliant. So I would highly recommend you go and check out Vanessa, and also Sanrixian, who sent the sticker. We have so many great artists in this community, so thank you. But Vanessa says, late to the party but wanted to say hello and give you a token of appreciation for all you do. And hi, Sam. Thank you very much, Vanessa. That's very kind. And Donna Daly says, hi, Robert. You said that the scouring of the Shire moment will be the battle with Cersei. To me, that battle was expected. What felt like the scouring was the Dany thing, which was an unexpected battle. Yeah, so the scouring of the Shire, what George R. R. Martin said about this. So for those who don't know, the scouring of the Shire, penultimate chapter of The Lord of the Rings, you get the hobbits after they've got rid of the ring and Sauron's been defeated, they return home. It's just them. They return home to discover that the Shire has been taken over by baddies, and they have to use the skills that they've gained in their time to get rid of the final baddies and return and restore the Shire, which is what they've in many ways been battling for all this time, to home. So that George R. R. Martin says that he thinks that that is a genius piece of work, and that the feel of that chapter is what he wants for the ending of Game of Thrones, or of A Song of Ice and Fire. So the feel of that is of the battered, broken heroes returning back home and having to save their homeland in a way from a final unexpected bad guy. So Donna, whereas I agree with you that the Dany thing was the unexpected element, I think that for me the greater parallel with the scouring the Shire is the characters coming down and having to get rid of the final baddie before they can start rebuilding. So before they could think about how do we actually move forward at the end of all of this, how do we actually make this a good place to live in again, they had to get rid of the final baddies, which was Cersei and Euron. So that's my take on what that's all about. I think, as I say, I think that the Dany thing is going to happen, but it's going to be in a slightly different context. But Sam, what are you thinking about? Are you? I don't know. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
I am, although true confession time, I have never sat down and read The Lord of the Rings from start to finish.
Okay, get
So
off my stream. Joke, everyone,
I
joke.
thought you kicked me out for a second for real.
Joke.
Oh my goodness. No, I am actually going to start on a read of it because I want to be caught up with it, obviously, before the series comes out. But what I like, and we did mention this a little bit ago when we were talking about, the possibility of those events being flipped, where King's Landing, Dany comes to King's Landing, Fagon is there, he's pushed out the Lannisters. Whatever happens between Dany and Fagon, then she goes north, then the attention turns to the north, then there is still that kind of final conflict, whatever it may be. I like your theory that it's going to be like a Cersei Euron type thing. I like that a lot. And it fits very well, I think, with if George R. R. Martin does want to do this kind of scouring of the Shire thing, that seems to be a good fit for the order of events. And I think even more proof that the showrunners for season 8, they just took those events and flipped them. Don't know why, can't see into their heads. But I think in the books it'll definitely be different. And I think it just fits that pattern, and it will fit that ending that George has said that he wants. That parallel, I think, a lot better. So yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
Okay, good. Again, we're in agreement. I love it. And it was a joke. As I say, I'm going to be doing Lord of the Rings content as of next month on this channel as well. So starting September the 22nd, Hobbit Day, for those in the know, we will be doing roughly one a week, maybe one a fortnight to start with, just setting out the groundwork about Lord of the Rings, asking the kind of the big questions building up to the Amazon show, which will be happening in probably about 18 months, probably around the same time I would have thought as the Game of Thrones prequel was going to come out, actually. But so they have to contractually, they have to start filming that by the end of this year. So it's the same kind of timescale. But anyway, so I'm going to start up. It's going to be set in the second age of Middle Earth. So I'm going to be answering questions about what is the second age of Middle Earth? Which characters might we see there? What does this mean? What kind of plot might we be expecting? Those kind of questions, and I'm going to sort of build it up over the course of the next 18 months or so. So big things I have planned for Lord of the Rings in the future. Actually, while I'm on little stuff going on, I did say I was going to mention the Well-Told Tale, because we've now done 2 episodes of At the Mountains of Madness. For those who don't know, the Well-Told Tale is my audio narration channel. I read what I consider to be the finest stories in science fiction and fantasy. The Mountains of Madness is an H.P. Lovecraft story. It's set in this kind of Cthulhu mythos, and it's fantastic. I really love it to bits. So if you're at all interested in that, I've done nearly a year's worth of stories now. We've got stuff like The War of the Worlds is on there, Frankenstein. I did Call of Cthulhu itself. Did a Conan story, lots of other great stories on there. So if you're at all interested in that, my second channel is The Well-Told Tale. Do go and check that out. And I always say at this point, patrons, thank you. I cannot do what I do without your support. And I mean that quite literally. Your support is what allows me to dedicate the time to this that I do. So thank you so much. If you're at all interested in becoming a patron, supporting the channel, or getting access to some exclusive stuff I do just for my patrons, there is a link down there in the description to my Patreon page, and thank you. I really do appreciate that. But we've got about 20 minutes or so to go, and we've got 2 or 3 more questions to get through, and then as many things from the chat that we possibly can. Kim Abridged over from Patreon says, the show ended really playing up the Starks, combined with the direwolves in the beginning. It really seemed as though it was how the Starks won Westeros, a song of Stark children who encountered a bad ice dude and a bad dragon lady. Do you think the book ending or the denouement will carry out that theme as strongly? So it's a strongly worded question. I think in the best possible way there, and I think it's right, because the show did very much focus in on the Starks. The books did certainly early on. Is this a story do you think about the Starks? We start off with the Starks and we come back to the Starks at the end. Do you think that that's it, or is it more?
Personally, I don't think so. I mean, part of me would like to think so because I do love Howland Stark. But I don't know. I think you can almost see that maybe having been the case when George started the series, but you can almost like see it having changed as it's gone on. And I mean, the fact aside that he's just such a good storyteller and world builder, and there's just so much that he touches on in so many different characters. I it's it's almost imperative that you focus as much on other characters as much as the Starks to tell the story that George is wanting to tell, which we have talked at great length, in the fandom and elsewhere about how the story is fundamentally, or at least I think you can make the argument that a large portion of it is about power, and people who don't want it usually end up with it, and people who want it never get it, or people who get it and realize it's not what they want. And you can't, that's certainly not limited to the Starks. I mean, we're shown so many other examples of other people put in that same situation. Yeah, I think that maybe he had an idea to start it out that way, and that it would be all about the Starks, and we start with them, we're going to end with them. Not that they're not going to be there in the ending, of course, but I really think the story has evolved past that. There's still lots of Stark story left to tell, and they're still going to end up in really important positions in the story and positions of power and everything else. But yeah, no, I don't. I think part of this question was, is it a Stark world and we're all just living in it or something? Like I said, I would love to believe that's the case, but I don't. I think the story's evolved past that at this point.
Yeah, I think I would agree. And someone in the chat, Eric Grabowski, says protagonists, which I think is a really good point. So the Starks are some of the key protagonists. There are a number of protagonists in this story. This is an ensemble piece across the board in the books as well as on the show. But there is no doubt that some of the key protagonists in what is happening are the Starks. So what Jon does is important as a protagonist. What Ned did was important as a protagonist. Similarly, Bran, we'll see it increasingly becoming the case. Rickon perhaps less so, as we've covered already. But Arya and Sansa, again, what they do is important. There are other protagonists. Dany is clearly a very important one. Tyrion is clearly a very important one. But the Starks, generally speaking, are some of the key protagonists in this story. And I think George R. R. Martin set it up to be a bit like that. And he set it up for us to be sympathetic to the Starks because we get a huge amount of stuff from their perspective to start with. I don't think it's a surprise that some of the characters that we're less sure about, people like Littlefinger and Varys, we never really see stuff from their perspective. That's just not what we get. And yet some of the characters like Jaime, we get inside them, their skin, and we sort of see the world from their perspective and we understand them more. He very, very clearly, right from the beginning, this is telling us things from the Stark's perspective, so that instinctively makes us want to like them. And it was noticeable, I think, way back when they were doing the original casting, and George R. R. Martin was saying actually there are only two people that he desperately wanted without having the sort of any kind of audition, and one of them was Peter Dinklage and the other one was Sean Bean, because he knew that Sean Bean would be able to do what he did, which was create this immense character that even at the end of season 8, people are still talking about him because his shadow was so long. So sympathetic, you respected him, you saw the love that he had for his children, you wanted him to win. When he died, it mattered so much to you. So that was what he wanted Ned Stark to be like, because he wanted us to sympathize with the Starks. So yeah, it's not a Stark world, but he did deliberately try and make us want the Starks to be doing well. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's have a quick look through the chat. Now is the time to drop any final questions in the chat if you're wanting us to pick up on anything else. There was a lot of love I saw for I don't know why people talk about it, but Dunk and Egg. Indeed, that is excellent stories. What else have we got? Turbo says Tyrion is the main character. Fight me. I'm not going to fight you. Tyrion is my favorite character. Doesn't mean I always like him the most, but he's my favorite character to read the perspective from. But I don't know whether that makes him the most important. It makes him the most fun. So Andrew Kay was talking about Winterfell or the Isle of Faces. Makes much more sense and much easier to make plausible than the show's King Bran version. Yeah. So as we can't talk about House Stark without talking about King Bran a little bit, do you buy the idea that we are going to have King Bran? And do you think that he would rule from the Isle of Faces if he did become king?
I like that as an idea. I like that as a possibility because I guess we don't. Now, maybe I'm not remembering this right, but was it that Isaac Hempstead Wright was told Bran will be king of Westeros, or was it just kind of a more vague Bran will be king? Like, king of what? Like, we don't really. Am I remembering that correctly? That he was just told Bran will be king, and not more specific.
Yeah, well, as I remember it, then and this was just like a random interview, he said that he was told there were only two things that George R.R. Martin has said had to happen for Bran. One was the Hodor moment, and one was for him to become king.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as, maybe he could be ruling from the Isle of Faces. Like I said, I definitely like that idea. That I think would be a little bit more fitting, or, well, maybe I'm just being biased. It's just something that I would like a little bit more because I don't like the King Bran idea. I'm sorry, George, but I don't. If what he means is literally that Bran is going to be ruling Westeros from King's Landing, I'm not a fan of that. I know that there are many examples of, like a mage king type of archetype. I don't like that story for Bran, though. I don't think it fits very well. But if it's going to be a little bit less straightforward than that, and perhaps he will be king, but in a much different capacity or in a different context, or yes, maybe ruling from the Isle of Faces. That's something that I would like to see a lot more. And I think that it's definitely a possibility if we're going to consider the fact that that's where our final conflict might happen. Like you mentioned, the whole thing about the uncreating of the White Walkers, and Bran, I think, has to be there and has to be a big part of that. And yeah, I would prefer it if it's not just Bran as king of Westeros ruling from King's Landing. I don't like it.
And I think a lot of people don't. So JoJo Lady Dane, I saw in the chat just saying George R. R. Martin was talking a lot tonight about wanting to do more Dunk and Egg, which I think everyone would be very happy with. That's why people were talking about it in the chat. In terms of King Bran, one thing that I'm intrigued by is I'm going to have Aziz on here from History of Westeros in 2 or 3 weeks' time. We've been chatting a little bit, and he reads all the way through A Song of Ice and Fire ridiculous amounts of times. And in his reread after watching season 8, his takeaway was that there is a whole lot more foreshadowing of King Bran than we previously thought. Now, I want to unpick that with him, which is why I've asked him to come on, and he's very happy to in 2 or 3 weeks' time. And we're going to completely unpick this idea about King Bran in the books. Why? How might it happen? Is it going to happen? Where the foreshadowing for it might be? What sort of king are we talking? Because I agree with you that the idea of him just being a king sat in King's Landing doesn't feel right. but at the same time, for the Weirwood network to win in some way and for him to rule in some way does sound plausible, but it's how that looks. And as I say, the reason why the Isle of Faces is appealing, I saw a couple of people talk about Winterfell. I think the Isle of Faces for me is the central part of the Weirwood network effectively, and so it's also symbolically central in Westeros. This is where everything within those few miles are there, and Harrenhal and the Inn at the Crossroads. That is the important point in all of Westeros. So it makes sense to me that is where things will happen. But yeah, I will sort of park it. I would agree with you that it doesn't feel exactly right, but I want to talk to Aziz about all this foreshadowing he says he's seen. He talked me through some of it. It did sound quite convincing, but I would love to hear his thoughts in full.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see you two talk about that, because that is going to be very, very interesting. So
yeah. And I think that it's I'm looking forward to, I have to say, the rereads after watching season 8 are fascinating, because people are starting to look at things in different ways now. And what always happens in communities like this is you get this kind of groupthink. Once somebody's come up with a theory that makes sense, everybody kind of buys into it and thinks that's the way it absolutely definitely is going to happen. And most of the time that's right. But some of the time we just missed out on a whole load of stuff. So the rereads are interesting, and I think that this is probably the biggest one out of everything that we're going to come up with that will make people look again. What did we actually miss? Okay, we got one more question from Patreon before we sort of start bringing this to a close. Morley says, what do you see will be the role of House Stark moving forward once all the baddies are defeated and the scouring of the Shire is complete? So I mean, I'll sort of throw in there that I think it's not going to be at a sort of a meta level. It's not going to be that different to the books. I think the details will be different, but Rickon will be dead. Arya is not hanging around to be a noble lady anywhere, whichever way that happens. Jon, I definitely see doing the Frodo thing of just like wearied by his role in everything and just sort of heading off to the north. That makes complete sense to me. Bran is not going to be the Lord of Winterfell, and he's not going to continue the Stark name, and it really is just down to Sansa. So in terms of House Stark, we won't see where she's going to go with this, but she has always, for me, had these kind of Elizabeth I vibes to her, which, for those who don't know, she was known as the Virgin Queen. Whether that's literally correct is open to some historical debate, but she certainly didn't have any children sort of, and so effectively her house died out, and she just then bequeathed it on to somebody else. So that works. I also like, and I'm not going to get into it here, I do like the Sansa Tyrion thing as well as another different option. But either way, the idea of the Stark name carrying on through the male line, I think that is gone. But what would you say?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Bran, we assume, can't have kids. Rickon is probably going to be gone. Jon, I think definitely. I'm going to make a bold prediction here, in that if Jon doesn't end up being necessarily like the Frodo-like figure, I think there's also a good chance that Jon and Dany both die at the end of the conflict. But either way, it's not going to be an issue. He's not going to be making a claim or anything like that. But as far as Sansa goes, I mean, it's not entirely unprecedented that the name continue through her, because she could get married at all, which I do love the Elizabeth I comparison there. I've seen that a lot, and I like it. So she literally doesn't have any children. It could always be like children of a lesser house that she kind of adopts as her own and gives them the Stark name. It has happened before in the Stark history that there was no male heir. So this was the whole Bael the Bard daughter kidnapped by Bael the Bard, and she had a son with him who technically wasn't a bastard, but they were legitimized and given the Stark name, and then lo and behold, the Stark line continues. I'll be honest, I don't see the name itself dying out. I think it's too important in the North, and I think that it's going to continue one way or another, whether or not, and Sansa could even marry someone from a lesser house and still give her children her name. And I think if the North is an independent kingdom, I think that is even likelier, because then it's like, hey, we're an independent kingdom, we're going to make our own rules here. But the Starks are going to face a lot of, there's going to be a lot of administrative work ahead of them, I think, after all the conflicts are done and everything the dust is starting to settle. So it's going to be a very different House Stark than what we've seen, just, practically speaking. But I'm excited for that. I'm really interested to see that, especially in light of the fact that from the prequel, we're getting these really early, rough around the edges, Viking type of Starks. And then potentially, at the end of the book series itself, it's going to be a completely different House Stark altogether. So it's exciting. I'm excited to see what they're going to turn into. So,
yeah. And I think I would agree with that completely. Just so somebody in the chat, so Sheila Hilton was saying, I find it fascinating that everyone writes off Rickon. I think he's going to surprise us all. I think what will surprise us is the power of his abilities. I think that we will discover actually he's probably one of, if not the most powerful skin changers and green seers in the Starks, but that will just add to the tragedy of him dying an apparently meaningless death, in my view.
Yeah.
I think that's just where we're at. Remember, he's even younger than Bran, and so it's not like he's this strapping teenage guy that he was on the show coming back, and you could actually imagine him doing stuff. He's still literally a child, currently living feral, as far as we can tell. Okay, I think we are going to end it there. But Sam, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to just remind everybody where they can find you on the internet?
Absolutely. And once again, thank you so much for having me back. It was such a pleasure. Like I said, I wish we could have spent more time together at con, but the whole, from being there, the weekend just ends up being such a blur between being on panels and attending panels and everything, but at least we got to officially meet and have a hug. So that was wonderful. But yeah, thank you so much for having me back on. It was an absolute pleasure. You can find me on Twitter at the Sansa Snark. That's where I spend most of my time. You can find Night's Cast on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter at Night's Cast, and please do give us a follow. You can follow Watchers on the Wall on Twitter at WatchersOTWall. And again, as soon as we have news, we're pumping it out as soon as we can get it. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, as I genuinely love having you on, so thank you, and I'll have you back on whenever you want. So just let me know. Okay, guys, thank you so much, particularly for the super chats and for the super stickers, which I'm still not 100% sure how they work, but thank you. I saw them and they looked excellent. Guys, if you are interested, let's see whether I can get my hands right. If you're interested, up here somewhere. Hang on, up here somewhere in a bit is going to be appearing a link to other live streams that I've done if you're watching later and you want to watch some more videos. Over there somewhere, no, other way, there somewhere, it's going to be a link to my Patreon page if you're watching this later. Thank you so much, guys. I will be back next week with the wonderful Vanessa Cole. Haven't decided what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be excellent, I'm sure, because she is wonderful. But thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, and I shall see you all next week. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Bye, everyone.